Hello, welcome to our podcast series, Paths to Governance, where we'll be lifting the lid on all areas of school management. I'm Sujal Zaveri and I manage Governor Clerking and Governor Services here at Enfield Council. In each episode, I'll be talking to people who are involved in school governance, exploring why they joined us, and delving into the key themes and issues that we grapple with each day. Today, we're going back to basics. We'll be exploring what it means to be a governor, what it involves, why it's such an important role, and what motivates people to do it. I'm delighted to let you know that I've got with me a very experienced parent governor with me today, Lorraine. Lorraine is a governor at St. John's on Clay Hill in Enfield. Thank you so much, Lorraine, and great to have you with us today. Now, without further ado, I'll start with our questions. So, first question, Lorraine, what motivated you to take on this role of governors?
Oh, hello, Sujal, and thank you for having me on this podcast. I wasn't looking to be a parent governor because I thought I had quite a lot of things on my plate at that point in time. And we were new to the school, but obviously it's my local area. And I was interested in supporting whichever way I could, and I would help out if they needed volunteers for visits. So I was involved in school life anyway, but not as a governor. And the school had obviously put out an election out for a parent governor, and there weren't many people with interest. So I was actually approached because we were new to the school, having moved my children from a different school. And I had to consider it, and I thought, actually, do you know what, why not? When I was asked that, I did feel I had something to give. And I remember the head at the time also saying to me, actually, I would also learn from it. And I thought, oh, yeah, okay, let's see. It's me giving more my time than anything else.
Thank you, Lorraine. So that's interesting that A, the school approached you, B, you were confident. So that's great to hear. What aspect do you think you've enjoyed the most and why?
I really enjoy when I'm in school during normal school times, when it's seeing children in assembly, when they've got concerts, performances, those kind of things. It's that excitement. And what I find incredible is children are just so willing to share information with you. And they're delighted to share the successes that they have. And I was in the school the other day, and I don't have children in the school at the moment, in that school. And they were just happy to say, oh, hello. How are you? Do you know we've won this in the school, we've done this, and it's those incredible stories of seeing how they have a pupil voice. And that's quite important to me, that you see that pupil voice in action, because in a board meeting, you don't really see those aspects. So it's seeing what the children actually live like, seeing the safeguarding in practice, and those elements that we discuss in the board.
So it's great to see all the things that you hear about in the governing board meetings actually taking fruition in real life.
Absolutely.
And the difference that you've made overall to the children is what seems to be the most rewarding aspect.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So why do you think that the role of a governor is an important one?
I do feel you do need the different voices in that group of people, in governance, in that accountability. And I think having people from different aspects of life is very important because we all bring different perspectives, insights, and that's useful. Our schools, the children are the future, so we need to ensure that our children are getting the best standard of education available. So those monitoring of standards of education, making sure the policies are right for the children, and also making sure that financial management for the school is sound. I mean, it sounds like the boring stuff, but it needs to happen. Schools do need the money to survive, to buy the resources that they need to pay staff. So that's quite an important view, and I think it just shouldn't be left to the school staff management, head teachers alone. You do need the external people, that accountability. So that's why governance is important.
So accountability is the community involvement in that accountability, and is also the support for the school, because it must be great for the school leadership team to have someone to bounce their ideas off and someone who acknowledges their successes as well as helps them with any of the challenges that they have.
Oh yes, and I think sometimes we also tend to forget that being in headship, with my little experience, so to speak, of seeing heads, it can be a lonely job.
That's right.
So I think it's nice to have other people external that you can talk to and see it as, if you need to discuss, supportive role, but at the same time be able to confidently challenge.
And how do you think that being a governor has helped you as a parent? Because you started off as a parent governor.
I do feel actually as a parent, how that's helped me is, as a parent always, with your own children, you always feel like, oh, they could be doing more, those kind of elements. But when you look at as a governor, I've got the hat of the whole decision making, the whole school. If you're analysing data, you're analysing a whole school data of performance outcomes. But actually as a parent, it makes me feel that, actually our children do well. They do incredibly well. They really manage so many aspects of school life, the extracurricular, the academic side of it, and it takes quite a lot, and it can be quite a tiring day for children, but they manage it. And I think that's, as a parent, it's just brought that awareness much more closer. And as a governor itself, I think the learning has been incredible. As a mum, obviously you're always juggling different priorities. So professionally, it helps me to be able, my time management, because you need to give time to read documents before meetings. It's just not turning up. It's making sure I've understood documents that have been sent out, because the school leadership spends time producing these documents. So it's important to read them, to understand them, and to make sure they're right for the school. And, prepare any questions in advance if I can, because I think then it saves time in meetings, makes meetings more effective. So I think from those aspects, I'm also learning myself in areas that I probably was not as strong as I felt. I consider myself good in finances, but I'm also a chair of finance committee. But seeing the different aspects of finances, I'm benefiting from it hugely. For instance, in buildings work is things that might not have interested me that much, so I'm learning personally as well.
And as a parent, you can see the incredible amount of work that goes on behind doors that you may not have been able to see as a parent. But as a governor, you can see how the mechanics of the school work.
Oh, yes. Just to add that, I mean, as a parent, when you drop your child off at the school gate, the school is clean, the site is clean. But I don't think you ever really think about it that, are the cleaners happy with the cleaning company? Whatever is going on, is the redecoration works going on well? Is everything working as it should? Are the toilets as clean? But yes, seeing it, in real life, and that everything takes a lot of effort and planning from the side of the school.
So you're a parent and you're a parent governor. And sometimes it can be hard to juggle the two and to juggle the two hats, because I recall being in a similar position and the head teacher saying to me, remember when you come in here, take your parent hat on, put your governor hat on. How do you find juggling these two roles?
I think by nature of my personality, once acting as a governor, I forget about my own children completely. It sounds awful, but I do. I really have that whole school on my forefront, because it really is not just about my children. It's important, obviously, as parent governor, hearing sometimes their views. For instance, if you're talking about a marking policy, feedback policy, and at home I'm seeing their books and whether they're marked, that's useful for me to see that interaction. But ordinarily it's about thinking that aside from my children, how do other children might feel about this? How do other families feel about this? So they are very distinct. I'm not there to represent any parent or myself, but it's to give that insight, that perspective as a parent.
So that's really important to remember for parents, is that you're not there to represent parents, you're just there to have a voice. So when things are discussed, you might have a different idea, and it just is, again, just adds to the diversity of the governing board, because you've got different voices there.
Completely.
Now, how do you manage parents? So, for example, if a parent comes up to you this is kind of following on from what we were just saying, but I'm sure that this happens quite often, where parents approach you in the playground and say, I'm not too happy about this, could you take this to the governing board? How do you manage that?
What I tend to do is, because they are policies and procedures to follow, so I would guide parents to the right procedure, policy. But also I think generally anything, in school life, communication is great. It's about keeping the communication open. So it's more like, have you spoken to the person you have an issue with? Have you spoken to the school? Why don't you speak with the teacher? and, take you from there, and then you can escalate it. And then sometimes you find that a parent might not have done that. So it's the signposting that's important. But also, I think, as a governor, there are elements of de-escalating without you meaning to, because you have the understanding of how to work behind the scenes. So you can help with that. I know, for instance, after COVID, there were some parents' anxieties over school trips abroad, especially, in primary school. Some parents were really worried about that. And when they talk about it, and when you just have a discussion as a parent with them, and you say, oh, what are you most worried about? You realise it's actually their own fear rather than the child, because children are quite resilient. And, once they have that first trip, they do want to go again, most of them anyway, from experience. So there's that de-escalation, that when you start talking to them to say, oh, but the school does a risk assessment, which is rigorous. They've gone through, checking everything, members of staff, children's needs. It's so detailed. And they go, oh, okay. And it puts away their fears sometimes. And then, things can also end up being, obviously, I'm not there to solve their problems, but it's just as a discussion, and having the knowledge that I have, that's sometimes quite useful.
That's really good to know. So you're actually allaying their fears, and you're helping the school as well, because it means that any time that would have been taken up by somebody else having to have that conversation has been taken over by you. Plus which, I think a parent-to-parent conversation sometimes is a lot easier, isn't it? Because, they can be totally open with you and you with them. So thank you so much for that. Now, what do you think about a non-parent who wants to be a governor? So what I mean by non-parent is, what do you think about someone who's a parent but doesn't want to be a governor at the school where their children are?
I can completely understand where that might come from, because I think sometimes some people find it difficult to separate their own child's needs on their priorities over their child and the role. So they might think actually to have that disconnection, they might prefer to do it in a different school. That's one reason for it. And for some people, it's because they just want to understand from another school, and then they can see what their school does. And it can be helpful, beneficial, because you can learn other practices and share them. I find sharing practice actually quite useful, because on some governing boards, they do reciprocal visits. And that's quite useful to see if you visit another board and you see how they do things. And you can take the good practice and they can take the good practice from you as well. So it's got benefits.
And one option could be that if you feel awkward about being a parent governor at the school where your child is, and you could start off being a governor at a different school, and then when the time comes, you could always be a governor in 2 schools if you wish. But if different things work for different people, so whichever works for you, do go ahead and apply for the job.
I would say so, yes, because people have got different reasons for doing it. Only to say that I think if they go as a governor in a different school, then they come under a different category, which would be in a different process mostly of how they get into the position.
So, for example, they could be a co-opted governor, some of them could be a local authority governor, and in most of the VA schools are a foundation governor. So there are different ways of getting in if that's what you want to do. And hopefully this podcast will encourage you to fill in a few application forms in a few different places.
Oh, yes.
Regardless of whether it's Enfield or not.
And also I was just going to say, I think sometimes some people don't want to be governors in the school that their children attend because they're put off by the election process. Some people do think, oh, maybe I need to lobby for votes or those kind of things, which isn't always the case.
Actually, that's a really good point. I hadn't thought about that, but that is a really good point, because also it might also be embarrassing if
some
someone...
people view it that way, isn't it? Like there's some kind of rejection, but which isn't quite the case. And putting yourself out there, I guess sometimes some people see it as a vulnerability.
Yeah, and you can kind of see that, can't you? And any advice that you'd want to give somebody who wants to be a governor? What to encourage them to maybe tell them what they would gain, what they could contribute?
Oh, I love volunteering. In saying that, it sounds like just sort of a cliche, but it's gratifying. Sometimes it's when you've had a busy week, so much going on, and you've had to give that time for that, and then you think, you know what, actually, it was well worth it. It's looking back and thinking you're making a difference for the next generation, for the future community, and just thinking about it, that these will be the teachers for the future, the different professions they choose to, the tradesmen for the future. And it's so important that we ensure we do the best for them. We give them the support, the schools give them that support. So I'd encourage you don't need to have any specialist skills actually, because just life experience on its own is good enough for you to contribute meaningfully on a governing board. It's just being prepared to go for training for certain aspects, like if you enjoy the curriculum, just understanding what the acronyms might mean and all the other things behind it, finances likewise. But I think people shouldn't feel hesitant to apply because they feel they're not skilled enough. In what way? What skills are we talking about? Everybody's got something to give. So I would encourage anyone, talking about the commitment once a term for main governing body meetings and the committee. So maybe 2 meetings a term, and obviously some reading and giving time to training.
So it's really rewarding. You get as much as you put in and you learn a lot of skills from it. So for anyone listening to this, you know what the benefits are and you know what the rewards are.
Oh, because you're sitting on a strategic board. So that's quite important on that. You learn quite a lot. Is those skills at a higher level.
Excellent. And that seems like the perfect place to draw our conversation to a close. If you want to find out more about being a governor, then please go to the Enfield Council website where you will hear more. Now, it was an absolute delight to have you with us today, Lorraine. So thank you so much for coming. And for any listeners, thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.
Goodbye.